This is the most difficult part after you've had a very good lunch. You become a bit drowsy, and so I'm going to be quick on this. Like I said, originally we wanted to look at the document, the updated draft document, which is essentially based on the ITU cybersecurity strategy guidelines or model. And since we are not authorized to use the document, I'll just try to look at what essentially is in this document, and then we can anticipate what exactly we might have in the ITU document that eventually, the National Cybersecurity document, which will eventually be made available, hopefully, in the next few weeks. The original plan was to also have a breakout session where we're going to look at specific aspects, because in the room we have a cross-section of people. We have a few guys who are technical, some people who are governance people, media, and so forth and so on. So we're going to look at the different aspects which will help us properly gauge it. But since we don't have the document, we might just maybe have a question and answer time so that we can tease out what we can expect, especially with regards to rights of citizens online and so forth and so on. So essentially what I'll be looking at is looking at the global cyber security agenda, which the ITU is pursuing. And they look at cybersecurity as a global issue, and therefore the intention is to make sure that every country or everywhere globally is doing something to secure their space. Because what happens is that if Ghana puts all the protective measures and we can secure our space, and Togo is not doing that, it's a vulnerability. And therefore, we are likely to fall under some of the attacks that come on us. So the global north is trying to help the global south. So you see a lot of initiatives where, people, for instance, within the incident response committee, they're giving a lot of fellowships to the African and other South countries in Asia, opportunity to go and see what is being done so that they can learn from those things. So I'll just look at a few threats. These are very familiar to us, but I think Ken mentioned a number of them in his presentation. I'll just emphasize a little bit on that and look at the 5-pillar platform that is part of the Global Cyber Initiative. And then we'll look at the model. How is the ITU cybersecurity model? And then especially for the strategy part, the actions that are prescribed. And that's, then we can conclude. So you come along with me as I make these. All right, so we have different sources of cyber attack. For us, what we know is maybe people stealing our information, hacking into our phones. There are things like botnets where people will plant a software on your phone. And many of us here, I believe, have botnets on our phones that we don't know. And what essentially this does is to allow a bot master who sits somewhere to launch attacks using your phones. But you don't know, because you don't even have a clue what it is to have these softwares on your system. We just go anywhere, we keep downloading things on our phones, and those things pose risk. So we should be a bit cautious when we do that. But essentially, I'm looking at the bigger picture, a more global picture of the common threats. And most of the threats, I think, Ken mentioned a few of them, the state orchestrated attacks. You know, North Korea, we've seen when the Sony issue came about, and, you know, people, I mean, they had to hack into the Sony systems and disrupt a number of things, steal some information, and so forth. So there is the state actor kind of activity, but we have grouped this in different, so we have foreign intelligence services. In Ghana, we call it the research. Some people use those as state actors to make attacks to different systems. Then, of course, we have disaffected employees. There are some employees who work in an environment. If you lose faith with a company and you have to leave, some of them plant things in the company networks that eventually become something that works against or opens up a back door, and then people can come in and do things. Perhaps such people can themselves orchestrate some of these attacks and so forth. We also have investigative journalists. People can become a source of attack when they open up to be used in doing certain specific things. Specifically, when we talk about this, we are talking about how people, through whatever thing they are doing, discover certain things and make it available for people to be able to use it to attack other people. Then we have the extremist organizations, Unanimous and other organizations. These are groups who are activists. They come, and I know Unanimous, they've attacked a number of systems, especially the global financial systems. They take money and they say they are using it for deprived people, and so forth and so on. So we have those extremists also doing this. And then hacktivism, or hacktivists, these are people who use hacking as a way of making their case, right? So I recall in Ghana, we seized an Argentinian ship, I think 2014 or so, because they owed somebody, and he sent an injunction for the ship to be held in Ghana. Now, during that period, the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General's department's website was defaced. And they said if we don't release the ship, then they are going to do more of these activities. You know, so within a short time, we said, we don't like our matter, so we just quickly, despite the ship, and that's where it ended. So people here are using hacking as a way of protesting or making their case that, look, we don't like this, and so if you don't do anything about it, we are going to increase the rate at which we do some of these things. Then, of course, there's the organized crime groups. How many of us have heard about the dark web? The last time I spoke here, I spoke about the dark web being something that is equivalent to what we know as the mafia, the underground, mafia, Italian mafia. When we talk about mafia, well organized, and these guys, and that's why Ken was talking about, people can learn how to hack. There are tools. There are tools that you can buy from $10 on, and then you can start hacking. But you get those tools in the well-organized underground crime, cyber world, the dark world. Okay? You can even hire hackers to hack for you. And they have the moles at the bottom. They do the groundwork, and then you have like the couples before you have the boss. So it's a well-structured thing, and they're causing a lot of havoc and doing a lot of attacking and other things in the world. So these are some of the global threats that ITU have been trying to resolve, for which it came out with the Global Cybersecurity Agenda. Now, this agenda proposes an approach to solving some of these things using a global format. So what you see here is what we call the 5-part platform. So as you can see, from 1, you read it upward, it tells you legal measure. 2, it talks about technical and procedural measure. 3, it talks about organizational measure. 4, you have to read it this way. It talks about capacity building. 5, it talks about international cooperation. So incorporated in this 5 pillars is what ITU proposed as an easy way to start working towards securing global cybersecurity. So these are the pillars in the 5-part. The first one, legal, this pillar seeks to elaborate strategies for development of modal, global, applicable, and interoperable cybercrime legislation. Okay? And the overall goal of this pillar is to develop, advise, an internationally compatible process for handling crime committed over ICT. So that's pillar number 1. Now, pillar number 2 is the technical and procedural measures. It focuses on measures for addressing vulnerabilities in software products. Okay, so that is the technical aspect of it, and especially those of us who like to download free software. There's nothing free. There's no free lunch. So somebody says, oh, I've got a crack, so I can use my Microsoft Office. You've just exposed yourself to a criminal gang. Why would somebody crack a software and say, oh, I like you, so take it and use it? And we are so excited to use crack software. That is what we are talking about in Pillar 2. You need to secure your systems. Sometimes they exploit, vulnerabilities in software, Microsoft and other things, and they use those loopholes to attack different networks. So Pillar 2 is talking about how to secure software products and make sure that it doesn't become a means by which people can attack systems. So the pillar aims to devise globally acceptable accreditation schemes, protocols, and standards. Okay? Then 3 is the organizational measures. It aims to create organizational structures and strategies to help prevent, detect, and respond to attacks against critical information infrastructures. I did explain earlier on what critical information infrastructure, your phone numbers that MTN is holding, is an example of that. So strategies to ensure that these things are done. So here you talk about national cybersecurity, you talk about the incident response and how it's arranged to respond when incidences occur. Then the 4th one is capacity building. It talks about strategies to enhance knowledge and expertise to boost cybersecurity on the national policy agenda. So here it's about what we are doing now, trying to open your understanding to certain issues that has to do with cybersecurity. There is the capacity building aspect where you train people to be able to do specific, both technical and non-technical, so that they can do whatever they have to do in that very world. So that's the capacity building pillar. And then pillar 5, like we said, the cyber world is borderless. So That's why anybody can sit in Russia and attack systems all over Africa. When I was the set manager, we developed this tool, as you see, a Decanfo Cybersecurity Early Warning System. And this tool gives us an expose of all the threats within the Ghana cyberspace. So if you visualize the thing, you're able to see, oh, okay, from the academic section, this university has these kind of vulnerabilities, and it's prone to be attacked by so and so because of the vulnerabilities that we see. So we need to cooperate. So sometimes we get a mail from US saying that they have seen an IP address from a Ghanaian network, let's say Tigo, attacking the Bank of America. And because of jurisdictional issues, they can't come into our space and try to solve the problem. So we have international cooperation where the US CERT talks to the Ghana CERT, and then we work with the network operators to try to resolve these problems. I recall there was a case where a machine at the Burma camp, Mr. General, was seen to be attacking something in America. You know, but that system was actually on the NITA network. So they reported the thing to us. Apparently, I think there was some loophole in the software, so it kept issuing some commands and sending things random. So they had to inform us. We traced the machine and went to Burma camp and told them that this machine, Americans say the thing is... So you see how easy you can actually trigger off a cyber war. You know, so we had to down the machine, stop that process, and then they fixed the machine. Apparently, it was the same downloading of cracks and, you know, unlicensed software that had given somebody an opportunity to plant a bot that was just issuing commands all over. So so everything that has to do with cybersecurity must have the international cooperation aspect of it. You can't work in isolation. You need to work with other people in other countries to be able to secure your cyberspace. So these are some of the things that is included in the global cyber agenda strategic goals. These are some of the goals, but I think that is not the subject. I just wanted to understand that the ITU model for developing cybersecurity strategy comes out from the global cybersecurity agenda, and then based on that, we're able to have specifics in that strategy. So this is a schematic of the ITU cybersecurity strategy model. So down here we have the context. So what is the context? Factors that is necessitating you to take specific actions. Unfortunately, it's not as clear as you need to have it. I think it comes from the projector. So, so from the context, then you go to the ends. And I'll explain these things later. You know, so the ends, then from the ends, then it comes to the ways, which are what I just explained, the 5 areas. So the ends are actually the national cybersecurity objectives, okay? So it's a global thing, but you need to have a context for which you want to develop the policy, right? Now, once you have that context, the next thing is to create the objectives, the national objectives for which you want to create the strategy. And that objective then tapers or dovetails into the approaches to making sure that you can develop these things. And like we said, there are 5 of the ways, okay? The legal measure, the technical. So it means that whatever strategy you plan to develop, it should be able to fall into these 5 areas. As simple as that, okay? So from there, then you can now talk about the means specifically. So for each of these ones, you elaborate on the specific things, and then you can now have your full national cybersecurity strategy, as we can see on that side. So this is something that if you understand, and I think the key thing is understanding this 5-way thing. And therefore, what I'm going to do is to try to elaborate on this a bit, what goes into what. There are so many things. We saw some countries, they had only 3 pillars, but everything was there. It was concise and put into it. America had 4. Canada had 3. UK had 3. But all of them included, and they have become best practice in different ways. But the ITU is like a middle way. Our old strategy had 9 pillars, okay? Because we are starting, there was nothing on the ground. So we cannot be like UK, who have infrastructure already running. And therefore, we cannot say that we are limiting ours to that. But this model gives every opportunity for people who have nothing to people who have something already on the network on the ground to be able to develop their policy and strategy without too much of a problem. So this is the model, and I just wanted to look at the elements there. You recall we talked about the elements that goes into every cybersecurity policy. We want to juxtapose that best practice onto what this actually gives us. And these are some of the key things that becomes the ingredient for that strategy that you develop. So you have the top government cybersecurity accountability. And we talked about government involvement, executive buy-in being very crucial in doing that. For the ITU system, there's also a national cybersecurity coordinator who coordinates cybersecurity across the country. And Ghana, obviously, we are already doing some of that. We have a national cybersecurity coordinator or advisor in this case, and he's soon to become a coordinator because, you know, they've set up all the operational infrastructure, and so he needs to get all the stakeholders. And actually, that's what he's doing. The advisor just sits somewhere, gets all the information, and advises the superiors on what happens. But as we speak now, Dr. Albert is doing more of a coordination, making sure, you know, meeting all the technical working group with all the stakeholders, about 25, 28 different organizations. Civil society has a slot, and we haven't, I mean, there's no representative yet. I think Media Foundation have been working on that. Once we can consolidate this organization, it should be possible to have nominations from civil society to sit on that technical working so that your voice can be heard. So that's the kind of structure that we have. The national focal point, and at this stage, is the National Cybersecurity Center. That's the point where all the coordination is done for our cybersecurity. Then, of course, we have the legal measure, where we have the technical, the legal write-ups that are necessary to to ensure that we can protect our cyberspace. Of course, we do have a cybercrime legislation, like I did mention, a solid one for that matter, but we don't have a cybersecurity law that empowers, for instance, the National Cybersecurity Center, which will now become an authority under the new act, to enforce actions. And the way we are so recalcitrant in this country, if there are no laws to enforce, people will just get away with all the things without being persecuted. So legal measures important. And then, of course, the National Cybersecurity Framework, a very important ingredient. And countries typically adopt a framework that defines the minimum or mandatory security requirements on issues such as risk management and compliance. So that is within that frame. Then, of course, the incident response. I've mentioned that also. Strategy-led program contains incident response management capabilities. And I think I did open up a little bit of what it means to have an incident response team in place where you have a pre-planned incident management plan so that when the incident occurs, typically in an organization, when there's an attack, everybody panics. So, hey, what are we going to do? What must we do? So this concept is a new concept that says that, look, let's have a plan that if there is an attack on an incident, first we try to bring down whatever things have caused that thing, or if we don't even understand, we try to curtail it from further escalating, and then we find out what the problems are, we restore the systems, and then we learn best practices and we share, information sharing, so that other people who face the same problem can also apply the same thing. So it's important, very important. It talks about our resilience because in the banking system, imagine that there's an attack. If you don't have a business continuity plan and you cannot bring back your system within maybe hours or even minutes, you can lose a lot of money. That's why the attacks in the banking sector are very expensive. Because every second, you look at the number of people that are transacting, let's take MTN and mobile money. Every second, we have hundreds of thousands of people sending or receiving money. So if that infrastructure is attacked and you don't have a business continuity system where you can quickly restore and continue your business, you're in trouble. And that's where incident response for. Awareness and education. We talked about that under capacity building, etc. And that's where we learn, we teach people, we also get some few tips, cyber hygiene and other things that we can work with. Then, of course, this is very crucial, public-private sector cybersecurity partnership. We saw in the Netherlands case that they mentioned public-private partnership. But in the new policy, which started in 2016, they are saying that it's more like an engagement. So we expect the private sector to be engaged in that development. Very crucial. Like I mentioned earlier, when we started drafting the current strategy, it was 2011. And for us, we're looking more at the technical aspects of cybersecurity. And so we had a group of technical people in the room without any proper private, of course there was private sector, but it was more like driven by the technical people doing things and not necessarily for the interest of business, but for interest of government. And that's how come, we had to make sure at a certain point that we were properly represented. So we have technical people, we have business-minded people, and that's where the business, continuity planning and other things come in, and you can have a better understanding of that. Then, of course, the skills and training. Under the old or the current cybersecurity policy and strategy, there was emphasis on developing a local cybersecurity capacity so that we can handle our cybersecurity issues independently after a period of time. So training, academia is supposed to have more training. We have certification courses so that people can be properly equipped. And you see America and even the UK, they talk more about engaging training to become top so that they can also share expertise. So in the 2016-2021 UK, they are now talking about exporting that expertise, to outside the UK. And that's the kind of thing that you need to be aware. You should have a skills training program that in 5-6 years, we can do certain basic things, like making sure that our networks are intact, be able to do penetration tests so that we are sure that if a hacker tries to come onto the network, he cannot get into the network. And then, of course, international cooperation, I've mentioned and explained it already. What is important in this whole thing is about the actions, which forms the strategy. So what actions must you put into that whole strategy? We saw the strategy process, where to start, what are your strategic objectives, what are the ends, the national objectives, putting those objectives into the five, what do we call it, the platform, the five-pillar platform. Yeah, five-pillar platform. And then out of that, you carve your... So with that kind of approach, you are able to develop your process. Now, what I want to do here is just give you some idea of what goes into each of these five pillars, so that it's an elaboration of those 5 things. So at the end of the day, when you have your strategy or your policy and strategy, the policy falls within that 5. It's easy for you to manage. You know whether it's organizational, whether it's legal, etc., etc. So for the legal, here are some of the things that is looked at within the legal measure. So the first one is cybercrime legislation. And obviously, I've mentioned that there's a difference between the cybercrime legislation and the cybersecurity legislation. So this is specifically how to prosecute criminals who offend or use cyber tools to hack or do things that is not desirable by society. So the country has to look at all this, and thankfully Ghana, we got a pass, and of course they are improving that that cybersecurity law or legal text. Because of our ascension, we've done a few edits, and so we are on top so far as that is concerned. Then cybersecurity legal authority. So this establishes whether a national government has a legal, power to constitute a national cybersecurity program. Okay, and that's where the cybersecurity law comes in. So we have now a cybersecurity center. What law empowers them to be able to act as one? We don't have it. And so it's difficult. They're having challenges, and that's where they're working to ensure that we have the law that gives them power to do whatever things. Yeah, the government says, yes, I'm government. I can do this. We've done this. We've done this. But, people can challenge you. So you need to have that authority, legal authority, backed by an act of parliament to be able to do some of these things. And that's why we have these allocate roles and responsibilities. So the Cyber Security Center will now become an authority with its own infrastructure. So there's talk about building a 5-story place, so we have sophisticated systems that will now be used to properly monitor the entire cyberspace to be able to work. Then, the capacity, cybercrime capacity. What really used to happen, and I must say, in 2016, Ken and I were coordinating the Ghana-US SGI, Security Governance Initiative, for the cybersecurity area. And at the same time, we were on the National Committee for the Council of Europe, Council of Europe, GLACI Plus, the Global Action Against Cybercrime. And one of the things, the first thing, when they did the first assessment in Ghana, what they realized was that our law had everything. The Ghana Police Cybercrime Unit were complaining that the telcos or the telecom operators were not cooperating. They were not giving them locks as required by law. And the people say, look, we can't keep locks for more than a month. So it took somebody to come and tell them that, but your law says they should keep it for 12 months. So that's why they say if you want to hide something from a Ghanaian, put it in a book. It took somebody to tell us that this thing is in your law. So how can such a person be able to win a case when he goes to court? So that ability or cybercrime capacity, very crucial. How do you interpret the law? And since the GLACI Plus, they've had training for judges, for prosecutors, for the police, and now Ghana has become a hub to train other West African countries in ability to use cyber law to prosecute cybercrime. So we've come a long way. Ken was saying we've moved far. We know what we are talking about. When we were in charge of some of these things, we know where we were. But since the GLACI Plus thing came in, come 2-3 years now, we have moved ahead, and now Ghana has become a trainer. So there are things in West Africa that lawyers and judges from Ghana go to train these guys. So that is how far we've come. But it's a very important thing under the legal measures. International cooperation under legal. There is something we call 24/7 center. And this is something that I think Interpol coordinates. There should be a place where every country can report any incident 24/7. So Ghana, for instance, must set up a 24/7 center for cybercrime issues, for international cooperation. It's very difficult sometimes for the people who work on some of these cases, especially when a hacker or somebody in organized crime is found to be, let's say, in the UK, and the crime has been committed in Ghana. How do you bring that person to justice? So you need to have international cooperation, and that is what the 24/7 centers in every country working with Interpol should be able to report these things in real time and have some solutions. But if you talk to the cybercrime officers, they tell you sometimes there are laws like multilateral cooperation where you can ask for extraditions and other things. But it takes like 6 months. I mean, by the time you extradite the person, the case is dead. Sometimes 2 years they have not been able to. So these are some of the things that, new things that will help process some of this cybercrime and cyber crime issues much faster, and so then we can ensure that the criminals are brought to book. But Ghana's accession to the Budapest Convention also provides a kind of opportunity to resolve some of these issues faster. Because by being a part of that convention, there are certain specific arrangements that allow you to be able to talk to your counterpart in other countries for quick, because the multilateral things is global, is big, is slow, you don't even know who to talk to. But once you are part of this Budapest thing, then it becomes easy for you to be able to make requests and even to get capacity building and other things from, and that's why the Glacy Plus program trained the Ghanaians, and today at least we can say on authority that we are in a better position than we were 3 years ago. So these are things that you need to consider within the legal thing. So if you're drafting the policy, these are the things. So we need to juxtapose this into the draft policy and ask ourselves questions. Do we have all these things properly documented within that policy? You can speak to the policy. You can ask questions because you have a knowledge of what goes into developing this, especially if it's modeled around the ITU model. Of course, the national context is very important. So what Togo will do might be entirely different from Ghana because our situations on the ground could be different, and that's the only different thing. So we should be looking more in the policy review or the strategy review, what are our contexts and how has it been addressed in the policy? That way we'll be able to make better inroads and gains. So the second one is the procedural, technical and procedural measures. But this one is broken into two. There is one that focuses just on procedures or procedural. And then there's one that is both technical and procedural. So this is the procedural things. What are systems that have been set in place to be able to do things? What are the procedures? So you have the cyber accountability, cybersecurity accountability. What are the procedures that have been put in place to ensure that top leadership is accountable for cybersecurity? Do we have anything like that? We need to be able to quiz those things. Collective accountability of all staff and contractors. I think the UK model, perfect. I sat in a workshop for national CSERTs, and I think they have something for all UK contractors for the government of the UK. And so you need to sit an examination. They will come and inspect your systems. You need to pass that thing before you can become a supplier. So if you haven't gone through that process, you need to be accountable. You don't want to become the weak link. Okay? So you need to be accountable. And so they have put in place processes. And that's where we should learn from and be able to put procedures for top leadership to be accountable, for contractors and staff at the Cybersecurity Center to be accountable. Because who watches over the watchman? That's a big question. We need to make sure that these accountability processes are put in place. Then, of course, we have individual accountability, etc., etc. Then we come to risk management. So if we say something is risky, what we are saying is, if something happens, it might end up becoming something else, if I'll put it that way. Typical Ghanaian. To become something else. If there's an attack today, what are the impacts? How can we minimize that impact so that it doesn't affect us? So we need to have, assessments of all these critical infrastructures, say. Thankfully, the Cybersecurity Center now has a critical national infrastructure protection manager, and he's working with the different stakeholders to begin a process of assessing each of these critical infrastructure. So the power, we have 9 of them. Is it 10? We have 10. ICT systems, government, water, transport, all these things. So we need to assess them to know the risk, so that if something happened to any of this infrastructure, how is it going to affect the ordinary Ghanaian? And how can we reduce that impact so that it wouldn't affect us the way we ought to? And that's the risk management thing. Okay? And then stakeholders follow these sound risk management processes. So there's going to be a new thing, an entire risk classification or risk register for each of these critical infrastructure. Mind you, most of these infrastructure are owned by private sector. You talk about MTN, they own a critical infrastructure, which is a database of users of the telephone network. So it's a national framework which they will be asked to comply. Same with electricity, and of course, because they are different sectors, you are not going to use one size fit all. Every sector will have its own risk assessment process. Then we have the security policies. You need to assess whether minimum security requirements are in place for all stakeholders. And you know there are different stakeholders. I mentioned those 4 areas: children, business, individuals or non-business people, and government. They have different requirements, and therefore you need to put different security. So for instance, the Bank of Ghana has set up the CERT, and they have issued a security guidelines for all banks. So now there is a security guideline so that every bank must put that thing in place, and they will ensure that these things, and that's what we are talking about here. There is a government directive that has been sent that all government agencies should do something. It's an issue of enforcement. But at the Cybersecurity Center, we have compliance unit, enforcement unit. It's still in the budding stage, but once they set up properly, they will be able to do it. Then the compliance and assurance. Mind you, these are all procedures. And so they have to be enforced. There should be continuous assessment to make sure that you are following the processes. If you lose that track, and we are good at doing that in Ghana, we have beautiful policies, have beautiful laws, but enforcement becomes a problem. And so we have become so, I don't know what to say. So it's important. These are procedures. Compliance and assurance is also one of them. So this is the procedure only. Now let's look at the technical. This is the technical and procedure. Okay, so we're talking here about a number of things. Again, you see risk management, we see cyber threats, we see all the other things, technical measures, accreditation, maintenance. So these are specific things. I don't want to just go in because our time is not right. So these are things that are expected to be within any strategy so that you are sure that you have covered the area. Sometimes it is not that detailed, but it is mentioned. And then when you go into the document itself, you see that the elaboration maybe is just like the UK one to deter that just one line. But when you look at the document, it's about 50 pages for that one line, which means that they have documented everything about that specific thing. Then organizational measures. So that talks more about the government accountability, and then of course the cybersecurity coordination and international cooperation within the organizational. We've seen this one under legal, and we're seeing it again, international cooperation. So it's very important under organizational. So I have already briefed you what has taken place already within the Ghana setup. We have a properly defined governance structure, and and information can flow from any organization through the national set all the way to the presidency. So anything that happens is possible to chart these things directly. So we have at least all those things already. So the new policy just states these things and then builds on it. And that's how a lot of the policies are. If you're doing something already, you build on it. And so you see in the Netherlands case that it says that, oh, this is what we did, but now we have added this component so that we can do it better. And that's the way to go. Of course, the national set, it's a lot of things that you need to put in place. The services model, the reporting structure, incident handling, and all those things are included here. Capacity, have you made sure that you're building capacity for your CERT? Because it's not as simple as that. I recall in 2014, ITU helped us set up the national set. We had a wonderful capacity building, 3 weeks, and then they said you're on your own. And you don't even know where to turn, because there's difference between sitting in a workshop and learning and now coming into the practical world and start using these things. And so we had to group around a bit, but then somehow we found our way and said, let's start doing something. And so we got onto some early warning systems, and then we started looking at what pertained, and then we started engaging the different stakeholders, and then we started that process. It's not as easy as just sitting there. We have so many sets in Africa who have been set up, but they are lost. They don't know what to do. So every year, ITU runs what we call a cyber drill. And you get different teams from Africa coming together, and they'll give you real questions, or they'll create an attack scenario, and then you try to do it so that you can build your capacity on the practical thing. So these are all under organizational measures. Capacity building, there are 3 things there. Cybersecurity skills and training, we've talked about that. The culture of cybersecurity, which is very lacking in our society. Oh, can you give me Ella's number? You know, I don't know. Yeah, oh, Ella's number, okay, take it. Without even first talking to Ella. That is not right. So we don't even have that culture. And I think it's our cultural thing. You know, you ask, oh, I'm looking for Marcus's number. Oh, yeah, I think I have it on my phone. And then you just give it out. And we volunteer information so freely. Anybody comes, he asks you, oh, without thinking that you could put the person at risk by providing that information. So when we talk about culture of cybersecurity, we are saying that how can we develop training, capacity building things so that people are aware about how they behave on the internet. Okay? It's more like the cyber hygiene thing that we're talking about. So culture of cybersecurity is very important. And for Ghana, we need to turn away from a lot of these things. When they did the maturity assessment, I mean, one of the things that they got out of that assessment for Ghana was that we don't have that culture of security in general. We just talk everything, verbal diarrhea, just say everything, you know. And that's how we have to, you know, turn these things around and begin to put things in the proper perspective. That way we can properly understand the risks of, you know, using the internet, and be careful what we put there. People virtually live on Facebook. People are sending everything. As soon as the thing happens, they put it. And you don't even think about the risk. And the internet, it always memorizes. Now they are fighting for the right to what? Felicia, what rights are we for? To be forgotten, eh? Now we are fighting about the right. Why must the internet keep everything? So 10 years ago, you were messing up, you were doing things that was not right. Now you have to take a position of authority, and that thing is staring at you. These days, people will do due diligence. They'll go onto your Facebook and find out how you have been living your life before they even give you appointments. But if we don't have that culture and we don't begin to develop these things, it's going to be difficult for us to properly, understand the risks and therefore, work to ensure that we are not exposing ourselves unnecessarily. Of course, cybersecurity innovation is also part of the capacity building. What are the things that the internet was built so that, and the nature of the internet was such that it promotes innovation. How do we promote cybersecurity innovation? I was in Israel for a meeting, and with my boss, I chanced into a meetup. It was an evening, and people were having fun, drinking. But they were doing things like what we call hackathons, okay? So you bring guys there, and they try to develop different applications. And that's why today, Israel stands out as one of the prominent, countries where there's a lot of cybersecurity innovation coming out. A lot of the cybersecurity products, and the good ones for that matter, is coming from there because they have created things to ensure that they can innovate. So they're doing hackathons, cybersecurity and other things, and that is promoting their economy. And so when people want cybersecurity tools or systems, they always look up to Israel. We need to do things like that. And those things, if they are in our strategy, it helps to promote these things as we do them. Now, the last bit, which is the priority 5, essentially is the international cybersecurity strategy. And, it's all about what measures you put in place to be seen, visibility within the community engagements. How do you position yourself with meetings you are attending, you are presenting papers, so that Ghana begins to become visible within that international cooperation, and like we've mentioned, within the cybercrime thing, within the organization, within the set, there's also international cooperation. How do we make ourselves visible and make sure that we have that competence within that jurisdiction? So, in concluding, I would say that the ITU strategy model focuses on the global cybersecurity agenda. Essentially, they are looking at the global, because ITU is a UN body, and as you know, UN tries to ensure that, the whole world is safe, okay? So even though we are working, you can adopt